Council. Tonight we have two agendas for our study session. First we have the Chief giving us a police department update, and then next we will have a discussion on the use of the public right-of-way for downtown as the possibility for display of outdoor merchandise. So that's our agenda. And then good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
You've had an exciting week?
Yes, it's been interesting. Yeah. So, hello. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to join you tonight. I'm Chief Doug Stevens, Chief of Police for Littleton Police Department, as you all know. I was asked to come in and provide an update pretty much on the safety situation in the city of Littleton and give you an overview of what the department's been doing over the last several months and year in a number of areas. So I have quite the extensive list here, and we'll go through it. Please feel free, as you all normally do, to fire off questions at any time, and I'll do my best to muddle my way through them. So I'd like to start with just kind of a current update on the current crime situation in Littleton, going over the statistics for the first quarter of 2015, January, February, and March. We regularly compare crime statistics from quarter to quarter and then going back several quarters, and in shorter intervals as well for our deployment operations. But this is a good area to kind of give us an idea where we're at right now. Let me start with a low note. Persons crime, crimes against persons, which includes things such as homicide, kidnapping, sexual offenses, robbery, and assault, is up actually 26% over the prior quarter. So that means compared to October, November, December 2014, the first 3 months of 2015 are up 26%. It sounds worse than it is when you delve into the statistics. Simple assaults is driving the increase with 23 more offenses than the previous quarter. Typically, those winter months, October, November, December, are our slowest months of the year, and then we build up as we go through the year, with the third quarter, the late months of summer, being our busiest months. In our simple assaults, these 23 offenses, all of those incidents are between suspects and victims who knew each other. There was some sort of relationship. Only one of those is not that type of case, and that was a bar incident. And all but two of those occurred in private residences. Although they're up 26% from the prior quarter, when you look at the previous 4 quarters, that's pretty consistent with where we have been the previous 4 quarters. Significantly down from the busiest time of year during the summer. So we think it's pretty much on par with where we should be, and no cause for alarm at this point. On a much brighter note, property crime, which affects many more of us, is down over 8% from the previous quarter, with theft and auto theft driving that decrease. So 2 of the most prolific crimes are down. We can attribute some of that to one is there was an auto theft ring identified and arrested and prosecuted that had been operating throughout the South metro area, and we took them off the streets, and we saw an instant decrease in auto thefts, not just for us but for many of our neighbors as well. And then also the car dealerships have done a better job of securing their inventory along the Broadway corridor, and we've seen a significant decrease in the number of missing vehicles. And that's a pretty regular occurrence to have missing vehicles from the car dealerships. Their fleets are so huge. But we've seen a decrease there as well. During the same time period, our calls for service, which means that's either a self-initiated call or a call that comes into our dispatch center as a non-emergency or an emergency call, have increased sharply. They're up 32%, which is over 2,217 calls from the previous quarter. The significant increase is due mainly to our implementation of a crime prevention and deployment method called DDAX, data-driven approaches to crime and traffic safety. We like to do acronyms in the government, so that's a good one. But basically what that means is you look at all the crime that's occurring in your city, and you look at the traffic accidents and traffic violations that are occurring, and you overlap those, and you have an analyst do some of their magic, and basically it gives us some areas where we can focus some of our proactive patrol and an attempt to prevent crime and drive crime down. So we asked our officers to change the way they were calling out their stops so that we could better track their activities, their self-initiated activity. So when we did that, we saw an increase of them getting on the air, calling out their proactive activity much more than they had been before, and it allows us to better track that. So we're seeing an increase there in those self-initiated calls. That included an additional 828 vehicle stops and over 589 what we call follow-ups, which means they're out on proactive activity at some location in their area addressing some sort of issue. our overall time spent on dispatch calls for service, that's non-emergency and emergency calls coming into our dispatch center that are sent out to the cars, actually decreased by 8% over that time period, so that's good. That means that less need for the police services on an emergency or non-emergency time. Officers spend approximately 55% of our time on calls for service coming into us through dispatch. So about 45% of our time out there is on self-initiated activity. So as the chief of police and as the community, what we would like to see, and I'm happy to say we see here in Littleton, is that as our calls for service decrease coming into us through 911 and non-emergency, our self-initiated activity of our officers increases. And so that shows that our officers are out there, they're motivated, they're willing to engage, which given the political climate that officers are facing some in other places in the country, they can't always say that. Our officers here appear to be motivated and doing their jobs out there, and I think you can see the result in a nice, safe community that we have here. The statistics bear out that our officers are engaged in you see that corresponding increase in self-initiated activity as the decrease in calls for service comes in. Yes, Peggy?
This one? Do they get any kind of reward for the calls?
You know, police work's all about the intrinsic value, so it's just warm in your heart. Yeah. So we don't offer any types of incentives or awards other than you do a specific incident where you do a great job. We obviously have commendations. You've been part of that of our annual awards ceremony. But really, it's just all about going out there, and if you're a police officer and you're a cop in your heart, you just love to go out there and find things that negatively affect the community. So basically, you go out there and hunt for crime and try to stop it, try to prevent it, try to stop the bad people from preying on the good people. And that's what keeps you busy and keeps you motivated, and our officers do a great job at that. Some recent high-profile events I'd like to update you guys on and talk to you about. Some of these aren't that well known, but we had a homicide in 2013. It was a tough case, a really tough investigation because the victim had an extensive medical history and some substance abuse issues in and out of the hospital quite frequently, but we had reason to believe that there was more to this particular incident than was originally reported to us. So Detective Sam Mullins for us really delved into this death, which was originally looked at by even the coroner as possibly an accident. But after further investigation and dogged old school detective work, we were able to secure a grand jury indictment just recently, a couple weeks ago, for second-degree murder on this case. And not only that, but also they came back with an indictment for first-degree assault on a previously unreported 2013 incident during which the victim was hospitalized and remained in a coma for 35 days. So these were incidents with this victim where her significant other had allegedly been abusive, and much of that abuse appears to have been written off as previous medical history or substance abuse history. In this case, it just did not look right to our investigators when we went out to the scene, and they really stuck with it. Not that common that we take cases to the grand jury, but through our partnership with the district attorney in this case and hard detective work by Detective Mullins, we were able to secure this indictment. So this individual is currently awaiting trial for these cases. We also had a very unfortunate incident just a few weeks ago on April 20th, about 4:30 a.m. We had a senior citizen who was, she's a volunteer in the city. She was going to work. She was assaulted by an unknown individual, which is very rare, to have a stranger-on-stranger assault and robbed. And it's a very concerning crime for us in law enforcement to have a random assault like that. Extremely rare for our community. So we threw everything we had at that investigation. Again, our detectives were all over it. Within 24 hours of this original assault, we had a possible identification of a suspect, again through old-fashioned, hard-nosed detective work. Within 48 hours, we had our potential suspect under surveillance, and within 72 hours, the Littleton SWAT team blasted down his door and took him into custody. So we have a strong case. This individual is currently in jail awaiting trial on this, and again, through good detective work, solid work by that and our officers on the street who knew the people, One of the great things about our city and our department is the size allows us to know a lot of our folks, many of our folks, and that's what led us to this individual originally. And then when we delved into that, a lot of things fell into place, an extensive criminal history, similar types of crimes. He's a registered sex offender. So all the things that obviously, although I'm not a detective, I would say are clues and led us to this individual. So great piece of detective work, and we acted very quickly on this because, these types of random crimes are just something we're not going to put up with here in Littleton. One interesting side note to that is I know there's a lot of concern always, and I've dealt with it I served as a member of the Colorado Sex Offender Management Board for 8 years. Sex offenders in our community, they're a reality, and not all of them are dangerous anymore, but we're always very concerned. We always keep a very vigilant watch as we can and as law permits on our sex offender population. On this particular individual, we had done a home visit on him the week of this incident. He was also on parole. His parole officer visited him the day of this incident. So there was nothing that was going to stop this individual from committing this crime. So under intensive supervision, we had been to his house. His parole officer had been to his house. He still went out and did it. So we're very happy to have him off the street. If he's convicted of this crime, he is from what I understand, a habitual criminal, will have a lengthy mandatory minimum prison sentence. So we should not be seeing him again. Most recently on Friday afternoon, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the FBI Safe Streets Task Force, which is a violent crime task force, multi-jurisdictional task force, was tracking an individual they suspected to be the Longhorn Bandit. He's a serial bank robber responsible for, I believe, at least 6 bank robberies in the metropolitan area, none of which had occurred in Littleton, but we did have some in the surrounding areas. Evidently, he thought it was a good place to stay at the Essex House Motel, so they had tracked him there. They called in their FBI SWAT team, and as their SWAT team moved in to make an arrest on that individual, he fired shots at them and struck one of the FBI agents in the leg, right into the knee, actually. So he went down. None of the FBI officers were able to return fire. They moved the FBI agent out of the area, secured the location, and treated him, and then we came in and assisted in what was obviously a very large multi-agency response. During rush hour, had to shut down both directions of Santa Fe. Sorry for that to the traveling public. Yes. From where this individual...
I've been told that's why they have detours.
Yes, but from where this individual was secreted, we had no idea if he was still able to pose a threat to the public. He had a clear view of both lanes of Santa Fe, both directions, so we shut it down. We'll always err on the side of safety in that situation. So basically, like I said, the suspect was wanted for several bank robberies. We were notified by the FBI just before they executed the warrant. They asked for one of our canine officers. He had just arrived when they hit the door. DC Enley and Division Chief Enley and Commander Iman had just arrived on scene when the shooting occurred. A situation like that, people ask, and people are curious about how that all works because it's the federal agency involved. And interestingly enough, just on Tuesday of that week, I had hosted a meeting for the 1st Judicial District, all the law enforcement executives and the DA's office from Jefferson County. And the FBI attends those meetings. They were just talking about that on Tuesday, about how we will handle a federal officer-involved shooting, what kind of protocol we will have and how we'll do that. Within 48 hours, I guess they wanted to test that. So, but luckily their agent looks like he's going to be fine. He's got some surgery to go through to reconstruct his knee, but it could have been much worse. We're happy for that. But the multi-agency response involved Littleton Fire, Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office, Greenwood Village PD, Inglewood PD, Denver PD, and Douglas County Sheriff's Office, and Arapahoe Community College officers also assisted. And I'm sure there were more that I probably did not see, but it's really incredibly comforting to know that all those resources are available to us within minutes, and they were there, and I think that our personnel did an exceptional job of managing that incident as it was occurring. So we're talking about the FBI's involved. Their person is shot. It's their investigation. It's their federal warrant. But when it happens like that, it turns into our situation, and we take over the tactical response and tactical management of that until it's resolved. And then we will figure out who's going to conduct the criminal investigation. So for those that are wondering, it's really the local jurisdiction's command and control of an incident like that until it's resolved. Obviously, we work in partnership with the FBI, and we'll make decisions jointly, but really the ultimate responsibility is ours. It's our community. So we took responsibility. I was on scene, Division Chief Fenley was on scene, and we had our staff there, and we were working with our partners to make sure that we kept our community and our officers safe. We utilized some really diverse resources. We had an incident command post and SWAT teams from other jurisdictions that helped us out. In this case, we were able to utilize robots. A robot went in and cleared the room for us, which was a tremendously useful asset. We used our K9 Saber that actually went in and cleared the room after the robots and removed the individual from his position. And we used an armored vehicle from Douglas County that came up. The great thing, again, about these partnerships that we have with the region is these resources are available to us, and we utilize them, and they utilize us, and it's a great partnership, and we work very well together. This incident also highlights, for me, how our community support of our department through funding to staff, equip, and train our personnel has allowed us to provide exceptionally high-quality service during even the most dangerous of incidents. I was never once concerned that we were not able to handle this situation. A secreted gunman who had actually shot and injured an FBI agent, I have no doubt that we could handle that. I was incredibly confident in our abilities and our capacity to do so, and a lot of that is due to you folks for helping us out and giving us the funding and the support that we need to do what we do and train to the high level that we train and have the equipment that we have. So thank you to all of you, and thank you to the Littleton community for that. So speaking of the community, we'll move on to our relationship with the community. When I was first asked to do this update, it was right after the Ferguson incident. So obviously there's questions about how community and police relations are throughout the country. And when those things happen, obviously it has a ripple effect across the country, regardless of how safe your community is, regardless of how strong your community relationship is. And we have had incidents, several here in Littleton, where our officers roll up, usually on a group of youth or utes, and if you've seen the movie. And, we've had them put their hands up. Hands up, don't shoot, that type of stuff. So we just kind of look down at the side of the car. It's Littleton. So, but, we have an incredibly, and we continue to enjoy an incredibly supportive and engaged community here. We have over 130 active members of the Littleton Police Citizens Academy Alumni Association, of which some of you are members. They provide invaluable assistance to the LPD and to the Littleton community through their volunteer efforts, including Western Welcome Week, National Night Out, Trick or Treat Street. They help us at a number of functions throughout the year. They do great administrative tasks for us at the police department, which frees up our sworn personnel to be out there and provide proactive police services as well. They have formed what they call the Friends of Littleton Canines. So they provide funding for our canine program. They've had folks who they pay our medical bills for the dogs, dog food. They've provided kennels for our dogs. They purchased one of the dogs for us. And most recently, very happy to say, and very selfless of them, they purchased body armor for our canines, which is very expensive. It's kind of interesting because for an officer, a body armor costs about $800 on average for a vest. The same level of protection for a canine is about $2,000, so which is less mass to cover. I'm not really sure how that works, but I'm not in that business. Maybe I should be. So our volunteers in the LPC AAA have always sought more. They always want to do more for us, and we feel bad about, hey, here's more scanning to do, right? So because they love to help out their community and we love to give them an opportunity, recently we were, actually it was last year, we're always looking for opportunities for funding through federal grants. I came across a federal grant. This is where it's good to be the chief. I said to Division Chief Ferber, fill out this paperwork on this really easy to do federal grant, right? And lucky us, we were awarded a federal grant to institute what we call the Community Safety Volunteer Program. So what we're doing, we're in the final stages of selection and training for our community safety volunteers. which is going to be our volunteer group, specially selected and trained individuals who will go out and patrol in the neighborhoods using a vehicle that we purchased through this grant. That's pretty cool. If you haven't seen it, it's striped and lighted like an LPD car, totally different color, and it says volunteer in huge letters where it normally says police. But this gives our folks an opportunity to help out the community that they all live in and help us out by providing proactive services, non-emergency services, vacation home checks, business checks, stranded motorist assistance, a number of opportunities. There are endless opportunities for them to help us out there. For me, it's really about crime prevention through increased visibility. So having them out there in a vehicle that looks like a police vehicle, but not so much like a police vehicle, they're going to get in trouble. But it allows people that see that vehicle to know, hey, that's a direct line to the police department. So having that vehicle near schools or on school property, driving through there a couple times a day, going down the neighborhoods. If we have a burglary area where we're seeing an increase in burglaries, it's nice to send them out. Hey, could you spend a little more time over here? Just the visible presence is a really good crime deterrent. They've come up with some great ideas on their own, like we always rely on them to do, including door hangers for open garages and things like that, some different crime prevention tips where when they're out driving around, they can stop, knock on a door. Hey, did you know that I noticed that your laptop, your life savings and everything else is sitting on the front seat of your car. You might want to, take that inside or lock it in the trunk or something like that. So we're looking for those types of opportunities, and we're moving forward on that. We also are very happy to say that we recently had 7 folks graduate from our Volunteer Victim Advocate Academy. We have one full-time victim advocate, Linda Suttle. She does a tremendous job, but we actually have a need for more victim services than just a one-time person. So we've copied some other successful programs in the area and in the nation utilizing volunteers. Linda Suttle did a tremendous job putting together the Victims Advocate Academy. 40 hours of training for these dedicated individuals. They recently graduated, so we're starting to utilize their volunteer skills to help us out on victim services. It greatly increases our ability to fulfill an important part of our mission, which is to comfort crime victims. So we're very happy to have that. Currently, we have our latest Citizens Academy in session. We're planning a fall class as well. We try to run 2 academies a year, and they're usually very well attended, and we get good feedback on that. This academy, I need to go and personally apologize to. I think on at least 2 different incidents, we've had 2 different nights we've had to cancel the academy because we had high-profile incidents that called the whole department away. So the trainers that were supposed to be training them were out on the street providing police service at that time, and the poor folks, we tried to call them at one time and tell them not to come in. The other time, it just happened while they were here. So an agency of our size, that's going to happen, but that's why we're here. So sorry for them, but that's what we do. We also continue, and we're coming into the season where we're going to hold our very popular summer programs for Teen CSI for our middle school kids. They can go out there and learn how to be a CSI, including processing mock crime scenes. And then we'll probably put them to work on the real ones too, because, free labor. And then also our Junior Police Academy for the elementary school kids, very popular. We partner with our community members to hold these tremendously successful programs. We continue to have a strong partnership with Littleton Public Schools. Gene and I, Division Chief Hanley and I, just came from the one of the retirement celebrations for Scott Murphy, the superintendent. The punch was very, very strong. So, just going to say. But, and thanks to you, Council, you obviously know that you funded 2 additional SROs, school resource officers, for us in partnership with LPS. LPS pays for half of all expenses, including vehicle and maintenance and uniforms and all the expenses associated with a full-time police officer in our schools. It's a 50-50 split between us and the schools. We had 3 before, and they were basically at the high schools and kind of bounced around to the others when they could. You guys funded 2 additional ones for the 14-15 school year, which was great. Allowed us to put them all in every high school and middle school with the exception of Euclid Options Pathways, which, because those campuses are right next to each other, we decided to share an SRO between there. Again, looking at the opportunity for federal funding, we went out and sought a federal COPS grant, community policing grant, And this time, because Kim was still crying over the last one, I said, Division Chief Enley, hey, could you fill out this paperwork? So he did. He used to have hair, and now he doesn't. So, but we did. We were very lucky. We were awarded the grant. So we are able to now hire, and we have hired just recently, a 6th SRO. So now Euclid will have a full-time SRO, and Options Pathways will have a full-time SRO. So now all of Littleton Public Schools, whether they're in Centennial or Littleton, have middle schools and high schools have full-time police officers in them, which is great.
You said Option has one.
Yes. So Options Pathways will have one, and
Not splitting.
yeah, and so that facility, basically shares. So, and that's I'm a tremendous fan of the SRO program. I think obviously it has safety implications, but for us, more importantly, I think it's about the relationships we develop with our youth. And early on, especially in those middle schools, it's nice to get our SROs in those middle schools. I visited most of the schools, and it's really cool to see the relationships those kids have with our officers, playing basketball and all kinds of things. Although the officers kind of sometimes complain because they eat the school lunches every once in a while, but I said, hey, take your own PB&J. You'll be fine. So thank you very much for your funding on that, and we continue to move forward. And we will have that 6th SRO in place we've selected him, and he's already spending time at Euclid before the end of this year. We're proactively sending him over there to develop those relationships prior, but his official start date will be in the 15-16 school year, so in August. When they start up, he'll be there. I also was asked by Superintendent Murphy in December to sit as a member of the Littleton Public Schools Safety and Mental Health Advisory Committee. You may have seen some of their work on the news. Basically, our task is to review Littleton Public Schools policies and practices and procedures for school safety and mental health of their students and staff, and make any recommendations we see fit as to what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses and areas for improvement. And so we've been meeting a lot over the last couple months. Final report will be presented to the school board in June. So I've been participating in that. One other topic that came up that I was asked to address is special victims crimes, specifically crimes against our aging population. Because of our demographic in Littleton, it's something that we're constantly aware of and working on. And of course, the recent assault caused concern for us given our population here. I want to let you know we have a dedicated detective specially trained to address crimes against seniors, so he receives specialized training. The most common crimes you will see against seniors are fraud-type crimes. The latest one, given the time of year, seems to be IRS scams, where folks will call up, pretend to be or represent themselves as IRS agents and ask you to send money. They say there's a problem with your tax return, and you need to send them some money. For any of you who are watching or any constituents that you have may ask, the IRS will never call you on the phone, so they will send you correspondence, from what I understand, and lots of it, and always follow up before you would send anything to anyone. So do not fall for that. The older ones that are still out there but less prevalent now are lottery-type scams, where you'll receive either an email, a phone call, or a letter stating that you've won 300 billion Zimbabwe dollars or something like that. If you send them 10,000 US dollars, they will send you your money. Don't fall for that one. And then there's also the one that's out there that seems to be pretty, doesn't go away still, is somehow a family member of yours, a distant cousin, a relative or something, finds their way into jail somewhere in a foreign country, and they need bail money. And if you would just wire them, $500, $600 or $200 or whatever, then they'll get out. Don't fall for any of that. So if they found their way into jail, that's their own fault, and they can get themselves out. Unfortunately, another crime that we see is elder abuse, whether that's at facilities or in private residences and those types of things. We work closely with the 18th Judicial District, the DA's office for Arapahoe County, and Jefferson County when we have those situations as well. They both have special units that deal exclusively with these types of crimes, and we work well with them. I'm very happy to say, too, that I'm an active member in the International Association of Chiefs of Police, as well as several other law enforcement groups. I saw that the IACP has a real push on for what they call the Alzheimer's Initiative. and they're seeking to train law enforcement and first responders in the latest practices concerning Alzheimer's and dementia. Given our demographic here in Littleton, I feel like that's a situation we need to improve our skills on and stay up to date on the latest training. So I reached out to them and am very happy to say that we have been selected to host a Train the Trainer class for law enforcement, first responders, and community service providers in September for a multi-state region. So we'll be training for that. It's a 2-day Train the Trainer class. Because we host it, we get to put more people in it. I like doing that. So we will be having that coming up to help increase our capability to deal with that vulnerable population. Also, you hear a lot, given the current situation throughout the nation with a number of law enforcement-involved shootings, especially with individuals with mental health issues. We have over half of our sworn personnel and non-sworn personnel are trained in crisis intervention techniques. CIT training is what it's referred to as. We also have, it's my goal, and we'll do it because it's good to be the chief. 100% of all of our line personnel that would have contact with the community, including our animal control officer and our parking officer, and anyone who has control of the community, 100% of our personnel will eventually be trained in CIT. So I want everybody to go through that and have that capacity. What CIT is, it's a 40-hour class that basically teaches you everything that they know about how we can de-escalate situations, recognition of mental health crises, de-escalation techniques, and perhaps better ways or alternative ways of dealing with folks that are in mental health crisis. Some of our traditional police training is not very conducive to addressing some of these issues, and so this is the latest training for that, and we'll continue to send our personnel through this. Unfortunately, the opportunities for that training are not as frequent as we'd like, so it's going to take us a while, but we're continuing to work through that. Also, one of our commanders is motivated, and when we asked him to get involved in this, he got way involved and is like the vice president of a regional CIT advisory board now. So Commander Mandler, he's very involved in shaping the future of what that looks like as well. Very selfishly for us in Littleton, to me that means we're going to be able to find ways to get more people into the limited training spots that are out there. And then finally, accountability for our police department. Given, again, the national situation, to me it's about accountability, it's about transparency. A couple of things I'd like to talk to you about there is, number one is CALIA accreditation. We recently received our 4th award for CALIA reaccreditation. We comply with over 368 national best practice standards. We're audited regularly every 3 years. We just went through an audit, which is an on-site, it's an extensive and some would say painful experience, but having 2 nationally trained and professional auditors came out and went through all of our records, our policies, our procedures, our facilities, our practices, did interviews, met with the public, met with our community partners, and very proud to say that we were awarded reaccreditation for our 4th time. So great work by our personnel, great support by our community and our community partners. So that's a really nice thing. But that's also, it's about accountability with that. And that forces us to continually and without ever really taking a break, looking at our policies and procedures and making sure that we're up to date on the latest practices, latest procedures, the latest training, and then we're held to a high standard, and we achieve that. Finally, body cameras. A lot of talk about body cameras. From where you guys are sitting, I'm sure that you see a lot of, I've talked a couple times about federal grants. There's some state legislature has been working on some bills, working their way through. Some of them are on the governor's desk right now for signature. My view on body cameras, I support body cameras. I think that they provide a great tool for law enforcement. Unfortunately, I don't think right now is the proper time for the Littleton Police Department to delve into the body camera pool, because the deep end is very deep, and there are a lot of issues that have not been worked out with body cameras yet. including privacy rights, data retention issues, public records requests. The list is long, and while I support body cameras and what they can provide for us for transparency, for protection of the officers, I think that right now the legal issues are too much and the costs are prohibitive at this point. And so when it talks about federal grants, and we're talking about the state is looking now, I think, through one of the recent bills ready for signature, is to provide a grant fund to provide this equipment for agencies. The natural response would be, well, we should jump on that. Why should we not jump on that federal grant or the state grant opportunity to do that? The problem, as I see it with that, is that comes with a whole lot of strings attached on implementation of the rest of the program. The equipment itself, to me, is not the issue. You know, we can have those expenses, which for us, if we were to purchase 72 cameras, which we probably would not need that many, but 72 would be every sworn member of the department. The initial cost from one vendor, the most popular vendor, is $123,264 for the initial equipment. That equipment has a lifespan of about 1 to 2 years, is what I've been told. Where the cost becomes prohibitive is with data. With the data storage, and then you're going to get into policies. There's some groups out there, and I'm doing a lot of research. I'm watching all the time, and every body camera article I see, I read, I save. I'm looking at them, and you know, should you turn it on? Some people want you to turn the camera on at the beginning of your shift and leave it on all shift and shut it off at the end of the night. You can see the data issues. If you know anything about computers, it's going to come with that. These cameras are high definition. So you're seeing high storage issues. The storage capacity needs to be huge. The vendors are smart. They offer cloud-based solutions. You pay for the amount of storage you use per camera per year. So for us, for unlimited storage annually on those 72 cameras, you're getting about $86,000 a year just in data storage on that. So, and that's a recurring every year cost on top. So given all that, given more importantly, the privacy concerns and the legal issues for now, we're going to stay on the sidelines on the body cameras for Littleton PD. On a side note, Arvada Police Department Arvada and Wheat Ridge formed together and did a joint study, kind of a long-term study on body cameras, and given those same concerns, after doing an extensive participating in a study, Arvada has decided to not go with body cameras at this time either. So whether it's local, whether it's national, I'm watching, we're looking, we'll continue to look. I may come to you at a different time and state now's the time. We think that the issues have been worked out, but at this time I just think it's too messy for us and too expensive. So that's pretty much my update for now. I'll take any questions you guys may have.
Council? Deb?
I have two. One is what is your current relationship with the South Platte Park Rangers? As summer's coming, and we know that we're seeing a lot more activity down there. And in the past, I think there's always been a relationship, but I want to know what that is under your watch, and if you're happy with where it is, and if you feel that it's adequate, or if you are looking at ways to improve or change it. And then I do have a second question. Okay.
So one of the great things about Littleton is our extensive and wonderful trails and park system. Part of what I did during my first year as the chief was restaff the SET team, Special Enforcement Team, and one of the first things we did with them is got the entire team bike certified. The main reason there is I just like cops on bikes. You know, I think it's much more approachable. But also it was to help supplement the difficult job that the park rangers have. They have a lot of area to cover. And I think it provides our community with a better service and higher safety in those areas if we're there as well as the park rangers, spreading out our forces and then working with them as well. I know last summer we worked a couple operations with the park rangers where we went out with them. I'd like to do more. I think we could always do more. I support that relationship. I think they have a difficult job. We have some jurisdictional issues that have always been confusing and difficult. We've been spending some time working through those down in the south part of the South Platte Park. 3 different jurisdictions in like a half-mile area. But yes. But our guys, I think, are pretty well up to speed on what's going on down there, and we'll go regardless of the jurisdiction if they need help and assistance. But I think we could do more. I think we have a good relationship. I'd like to see more, though, and our set officers this summer and our other officers as available will be able to do those types of things.
Okay. And then this legislative session, there was an awful lot of law enforcement legislature that came in. Some of it got through, some of it didn't. Are you feeling comfortable with what happened?
Comfortable, that's
I know.
a subjective
It's the
term.
state legislature.
So it's a difficult situation. Law enforcement's under the microscope, and it becomes challenging when legislative bodies become involved in the operational day-to-day practices of the departments. I think that this year, the CACP and the Colorado Sheriffs, CACP, Colorado Association of Chiefs of Police, did a good job of educating the legislature. There were some pretty interesting bills originally that I felt would have been overly restrictive on law enforcement or cost prohibitive and not funded, which is common sometimes. So, but I think at the end of the day, I think we came out with, and the governor still has to sign a few of them, but
Or not.
Yeah, or not. I think that we come out with some potential legislation that we can live with that helps. If it helps the public develop additional trust of law enforcement, we're good. I'm happy to say that some of those things that have been brought up in other jurisdictions and led to legislation we already do here in Littleton. One being a multi-jurisdictional investigation of an officer-involved shooting. So we participate in both the 1st and the 18th Judicial Districts critical incident response teams. So if we have an officer-involved shooting in Littleton and it happens in Arapahoe County, the 18th Judicial District, which is a multi-jurisdictional team, basically led under the direction of the District Attorney's Office, will do the investigation. So we don't investigate our own, per se. Same thing in the 1st Judicial District if it happens in Jefferson County. So that's part of one of the laws that's sitting on the governor's desk, because they want that outside investigation of officer-involved shootings. We already do that. So that's good. There's a couple photo red light ones that are still alive. As you know, we made the decision to remove our photo red light technology effective in the end of July. So those will be irrelevant to us, but I guess we're just ahead of our time on that one. So, but I think that most of the legislation that has survived this far and may be signed by the governor, I don't think it's overly restrictive. I think that there's things that don't really apply to us on a day-to-day basis, but there's nothing in there that I can't live with.
Terry?
Thanks, Chief. Short answers really work well for me, too. So on...
Was that one short? Because I don't know. I feel like I'm that bad. Okay.
No, but you mentioned the detectives quite a bit. You did hire a crime analyst, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Danielle Trujillo is our data analyst. She's done an exceptional job. She's one other thing we did after we brought Danielle in was basically she worked her magic on our crime statistics and provided real-time information to our officers. So now all of our officers just recently have been issued iPhones, so we have smartphones in the field for the officers. So on their person, they have the ability to access all of our crime data basically as frequently as she updates it, which is very frequently. So an officer's on patrol or they're on a bike or whatever, they can go to Google and go to the drive and go to that folder and figure out what our latest crime stats are, look at heat maps, figure out where they need to be, look at our DDAX area, and address their operations in that way.
I signed up for, was it RAID? The online thing
Yes.
that you send out?
Yeah, so any Littleton resident can go to our website and look at our crime statistics and look at a map. It's an interactive map. You can put in addresses and searchable areas, searchable crimes, and it'll show you the information.
That's great, and I appreciate that information. So then, with our analysts or detectives, they're working on the old cold case or stuff. I'm thinking of Broadway in particular, Broadway Bowl.
Yes, so we currently are working on several of our cold cases. We have resubmitted forensic evidence on a couple of them and have got some promising information back.
Then also, in lieu of what happened the other day, our command center, our mobile command center, how's that working out? Is it?
So I don't know if anybody saw what we had set up the other day. In a major critical incident, especially if you have a barricade situation where you have someone who's refusing to submit to arrest, they're barricaded in a position of advantage, armed with a weapon most likely, It's kind of a, for lack of a better term, it's a 3-truck incident. So we need one for the overall incident command. We need a separate one for our negotiators to work out of because they have to have privacy, and if, especially if they're on the phone with someone and negotiating with them, can't have people in and out of there. And then we need one for tactical, so for SWAT. And there's terms for all these things. Our unit I think is fairly capable. I think it's good, and we use it for the negotiators on this particular incident. I called for Greenwood Village's unit, which is a brand new one. UASC asset, which means it's federally funded. It's a regional asset, just like the armor that we called for. We called for an armored vehicle, a Bearcat from Douglas County. Those are regional assets paid for by the federal government, maintained by Greenwood Village or Douglas County with the armor. Greenwood Village also has what they call a smart truck, which is a vehicle just equipped with nothing but gear, 2 robots. It's got ballistic shields, portable, everything we would need for a tactical situation. We have those regional assets available to us as quickly as a phone call. So we actually brought Greenwood Village's truck up to be the incident command post. But I'm very happy to say as well that that's all coming, but that's a ways off. Luckily, one of the things I talked about with funding of our department is I was recently lucky enough to get a new vehicle, myself and the division chief. I might say the last vehicles in the fleet, but we got them. And as part of my previous work with the other department I used to work for, incident command was one of my specialties. So I knew what I wanted when I came to a mobile command post, capable out of a vehicle, my vehicle or Gene's vehicle or our supervisor's vehicles. We purchased that equipment, obviously no questions asked by this administration, and 2 weeks into it, we put it into use. So we had our cars there set up with mobile command posts, very capable. From one single small vehicle on the street, we were able to manage that incident very effectively. So we have that capacity and capability. And as far as our command post goes, we actually have a meeting set up. We're looking to go next week with us and fire. And the chief and I and our staff are going to go through that vehicle and see if we need to make upgrades or updates and check the capacity of it.
So was it Littleton's robot and Littleton's K9?
It was Littleton's K9, yeah. The robot is a regional asset. It's ran by Greenwood Village.
But it was our K9s.
Our K9, yeah. We have 2 K9s, Sabre and Coda.
I'll cut it down to a couple more questions so everybody else can get on it. So I know, as you probably know well, a little bit more than I do, of course, being at Denver, the gang unit, that they're experiencing a lot of issues this spring. I presume, since you're educated in that kind of area, that you're well ahead of the game here for Littleton.
So I'm happy to say, knock on some simulated wood product, that we have not seen any bleed over from the gang issues that Denver's experiencing here in Littleton. Right now, I'm very confident in saying we virtually have no gang issue in this city. There may be gang members who live here or perhaps go to school here. They don't cause any trouble here currently. So I know that wasn't the case a couple years ago. We had a homicide that involved a gang party and a shooting. Since that time, I'm happy to say we've had very little issues.
And also, with summer, a lot of folks put a lot of things after the curb for free. Does that cause any issues as far as crime?
I don't think I can make a correlation. So, I think that where I live, there's a big item pickup going on right now, which is interesting. Anything metal gets put out is gone before sunrise, but the mattresses seem to stay. Yeah, there's tons of. I can't believe how many mattresses are out there. Mm-hmm. But no, I can't say there's a correlation between that. I don't.
Thanks, Chief. You guys are doing a great job.
Thank you.
Bruce?
I just was going to ask you, how old are the canine officers? I think Saber's.
So Saber's getting up there in dog years.
Yeah.
So Saber's, I think, about 7. Yeah. Okay. Coda's new. Coda's a young dog. We're still working on Coda to train Coda up to speed and get him fully engaged. But Saber's a great canine. When we have to retire Saber, that's going to be a loss for us. It's a good dog. He did an exceptional job on this incident. This individual was deceased. It's unusual for even a well-trained canine to go in and engage a party who's non-responsive. But Saber did. He went in and did exactly what we wanted him to do. Removed this individual from a position that was not to our advantage and put him in a position that was to our advantage. So after the robot, we sent in the dog, and then the robot and the dog both cleared the room, and then we sent in the SWAT team the second time around. So it was a tremendously well-coordinated and executed tactical plan the second time around that prevented any further injury to anyone. And we had no idea if he was shot or not inside there. But
How generally, at what age would you retire one of the canine officers?
I would say within the next couple of years, I think Sabre. It depends, on their health and how well they continue to work. Okay. And but if we would see any health issues with Sabre, and we would start to think about, it's probably time to let him retire. And they don't have a 401k or anything like that.
It's para, right?
Yeah, it's para. Yeah.
Canine.
3 dog biscuits a month. Yeah.
And I guess just to close that loop, is there any sort of plan in place where you're working with breeders or someone down the road to look for a replacement officer?
We haven't begun those specific search yet for a replacement for Sabre. I think maybe it's a little premature right now. Okay. But we do work with some local trainers from other departments who work with providers from overseas. Right. Our dogs come from Europe, and then Friends of Littleton Canine are tremendously helpful for us, and they have our best interest in mind, and they are working to fund our next dog right now. And so that's really great for us, and we are really, really thankful for their support.
Thanks.
Yep.
Other Councilman Peggy?
I was going to comment on the Academy alumni program because they're raising funds. So if you see public otherwise, if you see promotional things like going to various restaurants that are sharing back the money, that's where that money is going into the fund to have money available for the replacement when it's needed. So it's super. So, but then I have a separate question.
And for anyone who's watching, you could just Google Friends of Littleton Canine or Littleton Police Citizens Academy Alumni Association. So.
Well, and one of the alumni members contributed the money for a dog, right?
Yes.
All the money for
one
dog.
particular member of the Alumni Association donated not only the money or the funding for our dog, which was in excess of $7,000 for the animal, but also enough funding to provide what we call canine castles, and that is a very accurate description of the dog's kennels at the handlers' houses for Sabre and Coda, and as well as, funding for ongoing costs. So she did a tremendous job. It was a very selfless act. This person is not wealthy. They just went on a ride with Canine Sabre and Officer Kiefer, and after that she was hooked and wanted to do anything she could. When she originally approached me on that, I was pretty new here, and she says, "I'd like to understand you used to have 2 canines," and I said yes, and she said, "I'd like to purchase your second one," and I said, "Well, that is very expensive," and she said, "I don't care." So I'm like, all right. So very fortunate. It's just one example of the many that we have of our community stepping up and supporting our police department, and in turn, the service that we can provide back to the community.
So, question, because I've been to the recent pinnings for officers. So it seems, and you and I have chatted a little bit, maybe you would share otherwise, that we have some significant challenges recruiting and keeping people, because the people we get, then they get wonderful experience, and then that gives them opportunities elsewhere, and we lose them, right? So could you comment on what you see, if any, about the challenges we're facing for that?
So I got to be honest with you. The number one challenge we seem to be facing is love. So we have highly qualified personnel that we've put through training that through life experience or life situations, their spouses or whatever are transferred out of the state or serve in the military, whatnot, and they leave us for that. So if we would just hire more people without hearts. That might be a little easier. I'm very happy to say we have not lost too many people to other agencies, and virtually no one to larger agencies. It's really more of a life fit for them. We had a great officer, Brian Lynch. She was a tremendous officer. We miss her greatly, but she basically decided to retire after 20 plus years with our department, and then to go work for the Colorado School of Mines Police Department, because she's a lawyer, and she has her JD, and she loves the academic setting, and she lives over in that part of town, and she likes that environment. And for her, it's a great fit for her, and we support her in that. So we lose some officers for those types of things. We had another officer, a commander, Sean Dugan, talented commander, who became chief of police of Red Rocks Community College, so moving on up for him. So we lose people like that. I'm happy to say we haven't lost anybody yet to like Denver or Aurora or those things for those opportunities. One of the great things about Littleton Police Department is, although we're not huge, we have tremendous opportunities for our folks. And because of the demographics of our organization right now, those opportunities are coming fast and furious as a couple of our newest field training instructors are learning. We just put 5 people through a field instructor class, and then we immediately gave them people to train because we're hiring all the time. And also, go to the website and just click on jobs, and you can apply for Littleton Police Department. We're hiring all the time. So right after you're done,
I'm making a
donation
note of
to
that.
the K-9 program. Yeah, it is challenging. Keeping fully staffed is challenging. Every time we get close, we get something unexpected, like we're going to lose a very seasoned and tremendously talented supervisor soon. He's retiring, unexpectedly, kind of early. He's going to go back to Illinois and work on his family farm. So not because we lack opportunity or they see bigger and brighter things in another organization, but their life changes, and so they're moving on for those types of things, which we can't address really. For us, it's really about giving our folks an opportunity to fulfill their goals and their professional goals and through training and experience and then special assignments, being a detective or being on SWAT or traffic officer, and we have those opportunities in Littleton, and that's great.
Bruce?
Bruce, what do you know about the cop stuff?
Yeah, take it easy. Take it easy.
I just want to compliment you on continuing the involvement with CALEA. That's a real kudos for the police department, for the city of Littleton. It's an outstanding way to manage liability issues for law enforcement. And some of those things that you were talking about as far as community relations and potential risks are definitely lessened because of the involvement with CALEA. So thank you for doing that. I think you're preparing us for something, and I want to say you've been very conservative in your request for staffing, and you wanted to really take a look at the whole circumstance and how you wanted to organize it. But the statistics that you gave us tonight, you've really increased the ability of police officers to be proactive out there. The rate of what they're doing is increasing. The proactive time in their dispatch, total 100%, when 45% of it's proactive and self-initiated, that means you got them being really busy out there on their own. You have an increase of the types of crimes that occur in private residences, and we're busy trying to give you more private residences in the community. It's all this, I think, is going to come boiling back around that potentially to keep this operational tempo that you've established, you're going to need more staffing. And I see it potentially as good news, not a bad news thing, good news, because you're finding a better way to provide police service out there in the community. And I just could see that need developing tonight.
Well, thank you. I'll be talking to you in a couple months, probably.
Bill?
I just wondered if you could briefly explain, CALEA, and how often or how many agencies are accredited by them and the significance of it.
Maybe you can help on this one. I'm not sure how many nationally are accredited. I think there's probably between police and sheriff's agencies, and there's several different options for CALEA. You can have your communication center can be accredited separately, the jail or corrections can be accredited, and then campus police can be accredited. We're under the standard law enforcement agency accreditation, so for police and sheriffs, we have a law enforcement program. And then there's different, they call it CALEA Light versus the fully leaded version, which we participate in. So CALEA, there's a lesser version where you have 100 and some core mandatory standards to comply with. We think that's way too easy for us, so we're going to go for the full-on, hit us with everything you have. So, but I think there's probably now in Colorado, last time I checked, around 20 law enforcement agencies that their law enforcement operation is accredited. It could be more. It changes all the time. And,
How many law enforcement agencies are there?
in Colorado, geez, I don't know. Anyone help? Yeah, I think there's 72 students. Yeah, so there's a couple hundred, several hundred.
64 counties.
Yeah, so every county has a sheriff's office, and then state patrol, they're accredited, and then several hundred. I think there's over 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States.
Okay.
So
in Colorado, somewhere in the 5 to 10% range.
Yeah.
And Littleton's one of them.
yeah, and
That's excellent.
we're just the best. Yeah, that's all.
Well, I've learned that tonight.
Yeah.
I'm new, but yeah.
We'll bring you up to speed.
Thank you.
Yes.
And Chief, I had three things to mention or ask a question around. One is at middle school career day that I had a chance to talk with the SRO, came into the classroom, but every one of the 6 groups that did come through asked who's the SRO, and they chimed in. They knew exactly who the person is.
Great.
And so
That's awesome.
it was really gave me goosebumps actually on that. With regard visibility, I know the city has undertaken a number of additional events that we have, and presence particularly in the downtown area. Does that fall under self-initiated, or how do the folks actually come out? Because I appreciate their presence and their visibility at those points in time.
So during our major special events, we plan in advance for those, and we staff accordingly. So we'll put additional personnel and specifically assign them to those. Like and some of those are private-public partnerships, and some are straight up private that they will pay for off-duty officers or extra-duty officers to be at as well. But anytime there's going to be a large crowd, especially when Main Street shut down or whatever, we'll have officers assigned, whether we pay or they pay, depends on the situation. But and then we'll always have an operational plan, so that if there's an incident or an event that goes south, that we're prepared to handle that as well. So we just want to make sure that we have the proper staffing, given the size crowd, to handle whatever emergencies may occur.
And then with regard turnover, Kevin's death was sudden for the department. Grief doesn't really get eliminated. It just kind of has its tail to it. How's the department doing on that? And then expand that to maybe talk about whatever counseling the individual officers might receive after incidents or within the department.
So yeah, tragic event, 2 years ago, pretty close, just past the second anniversary of Officer Denner's death. It was, that's been kind of a Band-Aid torn off an old wound, because the sentencing for the defendant, Mr. Dawed, who was driving drunk when he struck Officer Denner, was fairly recent, and I'm very happy to say that he received the maximum sentence available on that. Found guilty and obviously previously, and was sentenced recently. Tremendous showing by the community and the police department there at that sentencing. Several of us spoke, which I think was good. And I think the officers, I've had my share of experience with line of duty deaths and deaths in general of personnel. I've had good friends who have been killed in the line of duty. And you never, like you said, you never really get over it. But if there's a positive that can come out of anything like that, I think it brings us closer together. And, we're pretty strong brother and sisterhood regardless. But when we lose a fellow officer, this is Police Week, National Police Week this week. So thousands of officers are in Washington, D.C. Right now to remember our fallen officers. And for us, losing a brother like Officer Denner is difficult, but, we're a tight-knit family. I think that officers have become stronger and more close. And as far as counseling services available, we make everything available to our officers, whether it's a private consultant that we work with, or peer support, or talking to officers just individually. And it's really just a status check, a regular status check. How you doing? What's going on? And you kind of get a sense, when you work this closely with people, how they're doing. And I think our department does a really good job. Groups of individuals that are really close and take care of each other, and they do a good job at that.
Thank you. And on behalf of council tonight, thank you for your time. I don't know if you want to yield any time to Commander Endley, if you want to say anything.
Gene, you got 20, 30 minutes prepared? Yeah.
Okay. But thank you so much, and keeping the department solid, and certainly we feel safe in the community. And I actually only received a call on what's going on, but no complaints on the detours that were last week. So,
well, I just want to say thank you to all of you. I got to tell you, I've worked in areas where the support is not as great as it is here, and this is infinitely better. And you guys do a great job of supporting our officers, our personnel, and we know it, we feel it, and it makes them confident and capable to go out there and do the proactive activity like we're talking about. You saw in some other cities, and you're seeing it now in some cities, where officers are hesitant to engage. And I can tell you, in order to drive crime down, to prevent crime, we have to go out and contact suspicious people and investigate suspicious incidents. All that is on our own. Very rarely are we being sent to that. And through your support and the community support here, our officers feel confident that we can go out there and continue to do that. And I think that support and that confidence will continue to keep Littleton safe. So thank you.
well, thank you, Chief. Thank you. So, council, I have 7:37. Let's take an 8-minute break till 7:45 and regather. convening on time. And now we move on to our discussion on the use of the public right-of-way for downtown for the possibility of a display of outdoor merchandise. So with this, it's kind of a free-form discussion in general, but I'd like to start it off with a little roundtable component, which is we have this place called Downtown Littleton. And it's made up of Main Street and probably some additional environs around Main Street. Maybe if we could go around the table and folks could talk a little bit about what downtown Main Street means to them. You don't have to restrict it just to Main Street, but the environs and that. One of the things that I know is that when folks talk about Littleton, and I go other places, they talk about the really neat downtown that Littleton has. And it probably comes up in almost every conversation that folks will have where they're expressing something about Littleton. And, if I had to say there was one thing that is truly iconic about Littleton, it happens to be our downtown. And in addition to that, I feel that it's also our stage. It's where we have a lot of our events, citywide events that we have. It's not exclusive in that regard, but it's also a place where folks have come down, whether they're coming from Franktown or Lakewood for the Candlelight Walk or other activities that we have in downtown Littleton. Folks will actually mention some of those things. So I understand it's very important to us and to the city's identity that folks are there. And I'll look for folks to kind of volunteer, but I want to see where folks are around the table thinking about our downtown and what it means to them.
Well, obviously, downtown Littleton's a centerpiece for the city, but as we look at it, it's not really a homogeneous organization with one way of thinking and one way of doing and one way of attracting people. There's a lot of different facets to it, and some of those facets attract people to downtown for different reasons. A restaurant might be a reason, or a certain destination store might be a reason, or it might just be the fact that it's 3 or 4 blocks that really aren't in existence in too many places in America with an iconic structure at each end of it. It's just a totally unique place. I think it's really important that we understand as we try to figure out how to make a general policy for a downtown area that it is different in many ways. People choose to work there, live there, visit it for different reasons, and we need to make sure that we don't think this through in a way that shortens anybody's opportunities in the policy.
I think the context for downtown is, where we are versus where we were. I think a lot of you there's a lot of people in town, there's a lot of people here who have seen downtown when it wasn't particularly vibrant and when it was a different tapestry of businesses and residential and so forth and so on. I think the Historic Preservation District, and Bill can certainly talk more eloquently about that, has done a lot to sort of coalesce a feel for what I think the community believes is important down there, not just what a given council believes, but there is an historic fabric which collectively over a period of time we've all done, I think, a very credible job of trying to preserve and promote for all the right reasons. I think there's also a handful of merchants downtown who have made significant capital investments in downtown. And, at some point, I think you have to respect the fact that they're putting their money where their commitment is. And at some level, quid pro quo. I think it's incumbent upon us to support the people who are making the significant investments down there and do what we can to see that type of vision move forward.
I think, when has been a time for each one of us when we drove down Main Street for the first time. So at that point in time, I think what really strikes you is this tremendous sense of place. There's a built environment there that feels like it is what it is. It's an iconic Western Main Street, and one of the best examples of that in the entire country. And after you've got that stage, as you say, Phil, that provides a platform for people to work and have the culture of Littleton. It's really our hub. And it's, I think, up to us, and we've done it for the built environment through historic preservation. We have at least a foundation for preserving that, and the $50,000 grant fund has gone a long way toward a lot of the renovations that have helped preserve and propel forward that sense of place and make it even better than it was. And in fact, if you look at pictures from the time the district was put in place in 2005 and walk down Main Street now, the difference is palpable. It's really outstanding, and that will continue to go. I think the owners and the shopkeepers there are stewards of Main Street, and they are also in putting their investment in their mouths where they really develop that as a primary economic hub and help develop the culture that is Littleton. So Main Street is what makes us different than any other community, and there's a lot that we can do in a lot of areas of the town that are very, very important, but Main Street is our defining characteristic. So we need to make sure that that envelope is handled in a way that all the people who live, work, and play down there are in a position to help establish that as our foundation for the future and an economic driver for the present.
Well, I'll go for it. I think, obviously, Main Street is the heart of our city, and what was the word you used?
That it is not homogeneous, or
No,
that it is
you described it.
iconic, an iconic.
Yeah, and I heard, Bill said the hub, Phil says stage. But the one thing that we all hear from other folks is that they love our downtown. I mean, that is the consistent thing. And what I hear is that folks really do like the mix. We do have some businesses that they definitely have are the high dollar businesses. Those are fantastic businesses. We have other businesses down there that are lower dollar businesses. And all of that comes together to make Main Street a great place to be. And as you emailed us something out that you wrote and comparing it with other jurisdictions. Every one of these jurisdictions want what we have. And I think that's true for other areas. And I think the city manager, he's well aware of other cities and things more than I am. That's 171 of them, I believe. You corrected the
271.
271. When you corrected you corrected your assistant there.
I did.
But I think Littleton has what they all want. So I want to continue and hope our businesses continue to lead the way and not to try to immolate the other cities.
Not to try to what?
Emulate
Emulate what?
other cities.
Oh.
We're unique. Lively bunch here. We're losing.
I'm patient too.
We're losing prime time audience here, guys.
Yes, Deb.
Well, I agree that Main Street is iconic, and, people come to Littleton because of Main Street, and I think that's great, and I support Main Street, and I think we're very blessed to not have to create one. We are, as Bill said, giving the stewardship, saying the stewardship to the merchants. I think the city and the city council really have a lot of the stewardship of Main Street, and we've done a good job. And I only say that because it's the testament to that is that we have it's a strong leader in the identity of Littleton, and now we really are in an environment where we kind of have two super blessings. We've got this great downtown that a lot of other places are trying to create, and a great riverfront that a lot of places are trying to figure out what to do with that river that run through it that they never cared about. So we're ahead of the game on a lot of these things, and I think that that's good, and we are in a great place with it. I also think that we are on the verge of making some pretty substantial financial commitments to the continued stewardship that we've taken on as a very, very serious responsibility, because a lot of what we're talking about doing is stuff that we probably won't see the completion of within any of our council tenures. Bill goes just absolutely crazy and goes for 12. So it really is, I mean, we're sitting here with a great opportunity to really vision out and make it a place that is for generations in the future. I heard an interesting quote today. Someone said something that kind of stuck with me, and they said, you're not just running a city, but you're running a business. And Main Street is a bunch of little businesses, but in my opinion, from my perspective as a council person, I see it as one large business, one large commercial endeavor that's a responsibility that we have. So we're just kind of talking esoterically right now. Okay.
So I won't disagree with anything anybody said so far, but I will say that I think I love the historic feel of downtown, but I love also that it's not like a monument. It's a living, vital, breathing thing with an incredible variety of activities, from the now multiple-year Criterion race, all the activities the city itself sponsors downtown and other groups sponsor. So I see it as a at times teeming, T-E-E-M, teeming, thriving place that reflects a little bit the teeming as with horses and other things from over 100 years ago, and everything in between. It's kind of the place to be in Littleton, connected to the river, which also is the place to be in Littleton. So
I know how Jerry loves my stories, so before we go to the next step, I'm going to tell a little bit of a story.
I do love your stories.
I was actually this
I like
afternoon.
the end part.
I was talking with Mayor Rakowski of Greenwood Village, and earlier today, and he was back east, and we're both from the Cleveland, Ohio area. And don't worry, I'm recording the game this evening. So, but one of the things that it reminded me on where he was actually visiting, and he had a family reunion of sorts with his family there, is a place outside of Cleveland, or on the edge within Cleveland, called the West Side Market. And it's kind of this place that's also as Councilmember Cole mentioned, a teeming place. And it's a very interesting place because the locations within this, because it's kind of a bit of an open-air market that does everything from fruits to cheeses to meats. And when a particular booth does meats, they will specialize. It will be lamb, or it will be pig, or it will be beef, or it will be goat. And these families have had these booths for multiple generations. And the different booths don't necessarily get along with each other. And part of the teaming is, it's just to indicate that folks can have different impressions. When you go through the market, you may have someone in one booth yelling across the aisle at someone in another booth on some of what their behavior has been, and there's some viciousness in their exchange. And as far as I can tell, they've never actually had a physical altercation. But boy, you go through the whole market and you just have folks so you have this teaming aspect that's there. And it's just kind of an interesting place. I won't tell you about all the rules that they have with displays on their various different, because Jerry said we shouldn't aspire to be like anyone else, right? But it was an interesting thought that I had today when we're talking about folks having different impressions and of what's needed in that. What we have before us is as much as we're thinking about possibly something permanent, I will put probably a little bit of a framing around that I tried to get out, which is we're looking to most likely have some contracting for a streetscape study, which has the opportunity of possibly superseding anything that we might be looking at on an interim basis. And so what we're really trying to do is come up with something that will be here and we can actually implement or at least be in a position to discuss with those few merchants in a very short period of time. If we don't coalesce in thinking tonight, we might not have that discussion. So, City Manager, comments?
Just a few other somewhat miscellaneous comments related to your last few minutes. I think one of the things we're seeing, and several of you have mentioned this, we're seeing a significant investment and purchasing of an acquisition of properties. And so we've got Jose here is one of those. The Valley Feed Store, has been purchased, and there's some discussion about what that could redevelop as. The View House has pulled their building permits on the south side over there. And so these folks the values of those properties are bringing in investors and developers who have a different expectation of what that downtown is. And I think part of the challenge, and again, I think many of you alluded to this, the challenge is how do you mesh that with those folks who have been here through those colder, drier years, if you will, and how do you facilitate that conversation in a way that they are small individual businesses, but you are setting policy from a single, large, kind of cohesive perspective. And so just wanted to put that out there for you, and I think the council's commitment to marketing and events, specifically through the addition of the FTE and the funding through this year. The criterion, I think, is part of that. Breckenridge Brewery coming down, our improved relationship with Hudson Gardens, the things like the Elf Crawl and other events that are happening are all part of what is causing this conversation tonight. And then lastly, we are Council members Brinkman and Valdez assisted. We are entering into a contract with Civitas to do the design streetscape plan from Broadway to Santa Fe, and so that'll come to you before too long. And we will be getting started as quickly as possible on that.
You want to summarize current state if we make no changes?
Related to the outdoor merchandise specifically, we went from at least 20,000 feet to 3 now. Well, you want to transition?
I was going to let you, transition as you could.
Okay.
So
that was without a parachute.
Cabin
so we
pressure.
came right down. Yes,
Just a cabin.
decompression. So what's on the books right now is a business in the downtown in the CA or the B2 can come to the city, fill out an application, provide the insurance, and have up to 3 days a month that they can utilize the public's right-of-way. And then we also have all the special events are excluded from those days as well. And then the council had a conversation a couple weeks ago about increasing that number. That was initiated actually by then Councilmember Stein, working with one of the downtown businesses to look at 8 days. And that conversation, that ordinance on first or second reading is what garnered this study session.
I have a question for Michael.
Sure.
I should have read the ordinance before tonight, but I didn't. Does it specify, I can't remember if we specify size of display or location of display? Do you have it, Mike?
Yeah, Mike's.
So I'll just run through the brief. Mike Broughton, Deputy City Manager. I'll run through some of the brief points. 3 days per month, just as City Manager Penny said. To qualify, you have to have your entrance within 6 feet of the sidewalk, 3 feet from building max, 6 feet of clear space for the pedestrian walkway, and the total display area is maxed out at 20 square feet. And that's if you can somehow shoehorn in that 6 foot of clear space. So along the frontage of the building, they can be 3 feet from the building out with a maximum of 20 square feet.
The point, you start counting from the building and go out 3 feet, and that's all they.
That's all they can display on. Yes.
And how it's the width of their.
Whatever the width of their building is, with the maximum square footage allowed at 20 feet, 20 square feet.
Okay.
So
6 feet from curb.
If their door is within 6 feet of the sidewalk, they're allowed to display on the sidewalk. If they set back further than that, say they're one of the older homes, antique shops or tea shops or something, they can't display if their door is further than 6 feet back from the sidewalk, the right of way.
But then they usually have their yard. Or
Yeah, they have a yard to display and there's other things there.
Mike, can you cite the ordinance number? The one I was provided doesn't go into that detail.
Oh, sure. It's 8-1-5, prohibitions and restrictions, and then if you go down to E, temporary outdoor display of merchandise in CA and B2 zones.
Okay, thank you.
And then I just had one other thing, just as a point of consideration for us, that this streetscaping plan that we're talking about, because Phil, you had said that it would, whatever we do will be could be temporary based on what the streetscaping because if we're going to pay these people to do this, we need to listen to their advice. But I would say that it could be years before we are able to fully implement this plan, and it will be done in phases. So it's not like whatever we do tonight would be like a 3-month thing, because then we're going to have the streetscape.
Right.
It could be,
I didn't want to.
temporary could be 4 years or more, or what?
Correct.
Pick a number. Okay.
Bruce?
And one interesting part of this is if somebody is on a second floor, for instance, they don't have access to it necessarily, nor do they have any say in whether this is going to be there or not, because the say goes to the person on the ground floor. So there's some equity issues involved in this, if I understand this.
That comes with, if I can jump in here, I think the equity, we've created a level of inequity. We haven't created it. There's a level of inequity just out there. If I'm off of Main Street, I'm paying less rent than if I'm on Main Street. The question as it's before you is this is the public's right of way. And so under what condition, there is an equity, because of course if I'm on the second floor, I can't utilize this.
But my doorway may be right where this display is.
It could be. And I think we've made, the other example of inequity, if you want to think of it that way, is we have, I think, probably more as a culture, not just in Littleton, we have accepted that restaurants with patios are human draws, that we as human beings like to see people out eating and drinking, and I'm not aware of any downtown area that doesn't allow, and even in some cases encourage, the patios for restaurants because of the vitality that creates and the pedestrian draw that creates to come out and get out of your car and go and eat at the restaurant and then walk down the street and that kind of thing. I don't know that same kind of cultural acceptance and awareness is there when it comes to things like merchandise, because that becomes more, if you'll allow me, art is in the eye of the beholder of whether I like it or I don't. I think you saw that in our last study session several months ago when we talked about Aspen had more of a uniform expectation and others didn't allow it at all, so that was, you had the spectrum across it. So I don't know that you're going to ever get to a fairness and equity circumstance. I think you are the decision makers of the use of the public's right-of-way, and to what extent do you want to allow in this conversation the private use of that public right-of-way?
And for the sake of discussion, what we did last year created a potential inequity, but you always have the point where someone who's on the first floor has an opportunity to merchandise through windows or other space or signage that typically doesn't go to the second version, because our ordinances prior to what we had last year did not permit merchandising on the sidewalk. And so we created it by allowing for that merchandising by our ordinance that we put forward last year. So you're always going to have an inequity component, because someone can have window displays on the first floor that aren't easily as easily viewed if someone is on a second floor space. And
Do we have retail on the second floor downtown?
No,
we do some.
Who?
Well, Andy Marquez is on the second floor.
No, not anymore.
He moved.
Oh, okay. Well, he was.
By and large, the second floor is office space.
Office and housing.
It seems to me that if you had a retail up and a retail down, that becomes a landlord issue. To say, well, this building has X amount of space. It's not necessarily first floor space. This is building space. And it's the landlord's job to solve that dispute if it should arise. But I think there are very few above first floor retail spaces. I mean, I don't know if the tattoo parlor is going to borrow arms from Greg Rinke and put them on the sidewalk, but that's the only outdoor
But we
display
do-
of merchandise
we do
you
have-
can think
Fake
of.
arms. Fake
Fake
arms.
arms.
We do have multiple level restaurants. We've got restaurants with 2 levels and a rooftop too, which is different from the merchandising things otherwise, but we do have some vertical, energetic businesses.
But those are already covered by the
Right.
patios,
Yeah.
most,
They already
which
have
is
it
a
ground level.
revocable lease. So that's already falls under that piece, so it's a different deal.
And my second question, just to scope this thing in, is on the restaurants, they have a revocable permit, but we don't have an expectation of a 6-foot pedestrian around those areas that they've identified, do we?
We do now. That was an addition when council discussed the outdoor merchandise. That was a clarification as when you brought that ordinance forward. That 6 foot is used now. We haven't received any applications, but if we received an application, we would utilize that same 6 foot condition that you have in this ordinance 815 in our evaluation.
And the ones that are there now existing were grandfathered in?
Correct.
Okay.
But they are still under the revocable permit, and so if the council said we want to modify this and have them come into compliance, we could have that.
Okay, thanks.
A question on, I forget if it was Bruce, who indicated that the display may be in front of a doorway, and it doesn't look like we have a a statement in here about unobstructed access to the building, but I would think that'd be covered by fire, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think what Councilman Beckman was referring to is it's not blocking my door, but it's still adjacent to my door, so I'm walking in.
Okay.
I was trying to get a picture of the
General
totality
enjoyment.
of that down there and the ways that it interacts with how the flow of people is down in that area, really.
Yeah.
More rather than the control of the property so much, the movement of people.
And I think to echo Councilman Beckman's, this comment, this is the public's right-of-way, and so what you're talking about is impacting the public's general enjoyment, and he's mentioned the, access to my building and what's next to it. You had a citizen come and speak maybe it was last week about smoking and implications. I think it was Councilman Brinkman had asked the council about looking at smoking ordinance, and that falls into this general enjoyment piece of neighbors and how are we impacting each other within the public's right-of-way.
Well, I have I really have gone back and forth and around in my head with this because, I respect small business. I respect the energy that they bring to an environment. 80% of business in America is small business. Of course, they classify small up to like 100 employees, but still, even they started smaller. So, and I respect that, and I think that we have a lot of merchants downtown that are very committed to their business, and they spent a lot of time investing in it. I know I was at Lido the other day, and I think they're coming up on past their 6-year anniversary, and he said, we're finally making money. I think at 5 years they finally hit their break even, and now they're actually making enough money that they can enjoy it, and they can hire someone to come in and they can take a weekend off if they'd like. So it takes a while for these guys to get a foothold, and we have a number of businesses in downtown Littleton that have been there for a substantial amount of time. And so they are able to find that success. So, and we have new ones coming in and going out all the time too. So it's a dynamic environment in terms of what, the businesses. But it's also, we provide an opportunity for there to be the access to this. And without having that access, then there really is no business opportunity. And going back and forth, and I read a number of things, and I looked at a lot of, if you Google downtown struggling with sidewalk clutter, it's every city in the country has, and they're making ordinances and they're doing things. And what's really kind of a thread through all of them is this balance between the right-of-way and, wanting to respect businesses' energy. I don't, at this point, I have no stomach for expanding this beyond, we talked about just forget it and let them go 24/7, 365. I'm not at all in favor of that. I frankly don't feel as though, I guess my gut would say I just as soon not have merchandise displayed on the sidewalks at all. I think that it is the public's right of way. We have a lot more different types of public than we used to have. We've got people walking, not one dog, but 2 dogs. We've got strollers. You see it when you're downtown now. You see it all day long down there. It's not just on an evening where there's an event. You have people struggling, trying to get their bikes around. So you end up with people not riding their bikes, but walking their bikes. All of this stuff, it takes up space. We want people to come down. We want groups of women to come down and shop. That takes up space on sidewalks. that's what generates the sales. That's what's generating, if they're not there and able to get around and able to shop and able to feel like they can move around and that we're providing a clutter-free open, that's one of the things that kind of kept coming back from these cities in the comments was the clutter, the visual clutter, the frustration, the agitation that comes from that type of, exorbitant amounts of visual clutter. We have a lot of it down there right now that we put there. And we have stuff that the merchants are putting there. And then we have the merchants that want to put more there. We have other merchants that don't want any of it. I go in favor of really trying to keep the right-of-way as clean and clear as we can so that people have the ability to move around freely and feel like they aren't jogging around something or bumping a table or those types of things. So that is my number one. And for a place of trying to work with the merchants and trying to be friendly to their needs, or at least those that have, not all of them are asking for this. I mean, we really only have one that's really, really actively requesting this. But I would be in favor of exactly what we have. 3 days a month, permit it, come in, apply for it, pick your 3 days, here's your restricted space, done. They're not asking for it now, they're not coming down and permitting now. So I'm not sure, we haven't seen a real demand or a need. We also saw sales tax statistics that showed very clearly it isn't making, it's not moving the sales dollar, but I think that I think it's important for us to have a good relationship with the downtown stakeholders, and that includes all the property owners and all the businesses, not member groups. And so I'm not real comfortable saying nothing, never, no. At this point, partly because of our relationship challenges, and also partly because we do have a streetscape plan. So I really feel more comfortable staying pretty much right where we are.
It's a stake in the sand. I'll take it as a comment. Your stake in the sand. So, yeah,
Well, that's what we're talking about, right?
Yes.
So-
Oh, yeah. Well,
Isn't that why we're here?
yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
So I've really been struggling with this issue myself. If we go with what we have, even though nobody right now is pretty much doing what we're allowing, but if they did, we would have some of the things that Debbie's objecting to, 3 days a month, helter-skelter here or there, whatever. And part of me would love just to have the sidewalks totally clear, etc. But because we're going to consider a streetscape plan in 6 months, right, approximately.
Implementation. But
Yeah, right. It would seem to me if we were ever going to try this, just to see what the devil happens, whether this is chaos or having lots of folks possibly displaying outside might really do something totally pleasant and happily surprising, whatever. We could try this on a limited basis just to see before we...
when you say this,
We could try allowing people to display whatever they want, within the constraints, the distance constraints that we're talking about.
You're talking about no timing restraints?
Right.
No day
just,
restraints?
just let everybody do it. For whatever reasons, maybe nobody's going to do it, but if we allow this for this time before we might be starting to implement a streetscape plan, then we would know the effect of this. So, I've been really struggling with this, but it seems to me maybe that is a good way to go.
Not seeing anyone raise their hands, I'll put my... Go ahead, Bruce.
Please. Your hand is up first.
You can read as an ordinance, I don't want to hear it.
No.
It's our statute.
Legal interpretation.
It's been interesting because we've had a lot of friends that have chosen to ride the light rail and meet us here in downtown Littleton, and they travel from Denver and other places down on the light rail and meet us here. And this has happened primarily in the last year. And so this has been in the situation that Littleton's at right now. And they talk about the character and the charm of the city, and they come down and they shop some because they're carrying bags, so I know that they're doing that in addition to possibly enjoying some liquid refreshment or a meal. None of them have commented on the absence of what some of us may have come to know, and they talk about the charm and the character that we have. So I would probably at this point in time echo Councilmember Brinkman's point of we've not had anyone utilize it, so I would probably go to the point of if we want to reduce any levels of inequity, and so I'll be interested to hear what Councilmember Beckman says, of rescinding the ordinance that we added last year, or continue to allow it. But what I don't want to do is, Councilmember Cole, as I don't want to introduce the possibility of chaos in a time when we've been working so hard to increase our visibility and have increased the city's investment to help bring folks to downtown Littleton and on various different levels. And it's not to disregard the investment that businesses make on their own, but I've heard probably more comments from merchants that appreciate the lack of, what was the technical term you used? Clutter? Clutter. That appreciate the lack of clutter as opposed to saying, hey, we need to have and possibilities of more. So that's some of my thoughts. Bruce?
Yeah, I would concur. Two points that I'd make. I think I will continue to maintain that restaurants are fundamentally different than the retail merchants, and I think Michael sort of laid that out nicely. You need both, you want both, but I think in terms of retail hours, a lot of sales tax generation for many of the restaurants, and for customer experience, there is a difference between the restaurants on Main Street and a lot of the merchants, non-restaurant merchants. And then I think the second thing is, you look at this list that maybe, Phil, you put this together, or Michael, but you look at Denver doing 20 days per year pending approval of special improvement districts, and this covers places like Cherry Creek and Gaylord Street and South Pearl and so forth and so on. And if we're doing 3 days per month, we're already at 36 per year, plus the Western Welcome Week, and so forth and so on. And those particular retail venues in Denver are generally teeming, I think was the word you used, with customers. and they don't seem to suffer from the lack of sidewalk displays. I think we put it out there, we offered up, we correctly defined that this is public right away. We needed a few boundaries in terms of the insurance and the liability and the control of the space. We've offered to be flexible in terms of when people pick and choose. Nobody's used it at this point in time. I'm sort of comfortable leaving it that way until we see a problem as a result of the ordinance we've got in place, which doesn't appear real evident at the moment.
Bill?
I think it's been interesting talking to merchants about this because they're all over the place. Some of them think, they'll say, and I think you heard testimony in front of council that on the 21st of April, where one merchant came in and said it's important to my business, it generates notable revenue, and the other one says that display drives people away from my door. And I can't find a correlation. I can't find a correlation between more destination-oriented businesses, and we do have a few of those, and the ones that would be less destination-oriented. It is significant, I think, that the one business that caused all this to boil up, that was the most notable sidewalk clutterer, to use Ms. Brinkman's term.
Clutterbug, you could say clutterbug.
Clutterbug is no longer here, and that was to the point where it was almost
Hazardous.
It was virtually hazardous. The School for the Blind doesn't seem to mind. They no poetry intended, but they are out there trying to find obstacles, so that's not an issue. But I think the visual part is, have there been many instances, and Michael, maybe you know this better, but other than not applying for permits, have people been violating the terms of or the spirit of this to this point in terms of how much space or how far out or obstructing the walkways beyond the allowable footage?
Yeah, I'll let Mike do that.
Recently or not?
I think the short answer is yes, and council has directed us to enforce that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. That's exactly the case. Some people have been displaying anyway.
Okay.
So yes, there have been. We either receive calls from businesses down there or pedestrians that are using the street saying, "Look, there's clutter, or there's something on the street that shouldn't be," kind of thing.
So in that vein, I mean, over the long run, we can't control markets. We can't control what draws people into stores and what doesn't. It seems that if you look toward the more densely developed shopping areas like a Larimer Square, I don't believe they allow it. I don't know that for sure, but I believe their own local area rules prohibit it. Mm-hmm. And the denser it gets and the more traffic there is, the more they restrict it out of safety concerns. And out of also if there are 20 people on the sidewalk, you can't see the display anyway. That's why we have windows, is so you can look in stores. And, as Councilwoman Brinkman said, I think that should be your ultimate marketing. You can really do better displays in store windows, and that's an art form. Look at New York City at Christmas, what they do there. Tables with merchandise on it, or racks with merchandise on it, tend to be more clutter-oriented, but we can't disregard the fact that people say that it helps their business. I'm not equipped to make that call, that we should hurt that, but so in the long run, where I go is what draws the most people downtown? Because that's what's good for everybody. And it seems as though we need to have some kind of an organized, semi-restrictive use of the city's right-of-way that allows the people that say it helps them to have some displays without creating a clutter mechanism that hurts the ones that feel that it is a handicap to them. One of the ordinances that I think it's Colorado Springs has one of the most difficult to enforce sentences in the world, and I'm sure this will give you nightmares. It says displayed merchandise shall be maintained in a neat, clean, tidy, and orderly condition. So who's going to make that decision? By virtue of limiting the amount of space, and most of the merchants that I've spoken with who say they'd like to display merchandise don't want a lot of space. They want a fairly restricted eye catcher out front that is an advertisement for the store. They don't want to put all their merchandise out there. So I think I'd kind of tend to go that direction with a limited footprint advertisement that does not create color, but lets people see what they've got. So
could you clarify then, if somebody does that, they can only do that so many days a month?
And how do you pick those days and how do you enforce it? Is the enforcement mechanism, I think Councilman Beckman pointed that out. Is that a manageable enforcement, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the question Councilman Cole's asking is, are you proposing in that statement that you just made a limit or change in the number of days? We're not talking a lot of businesses here. We've identified, I think, 11 to 13 businesses, 12. So this is not an unmanageable situation. Obviously, if you increase that number substantially, but with electronics, I think we can handle it. But I think getting back to Councilmember Cole's question to you, are you proposing to change the number of days?
No. Okay. And the reason is we've got this thing coming in 6 months. This seems to be working. If it presents problems, we can always amend it. But
And just for your edification, and I think Councilmember Brinkman mentioned this earlier, we did look at, and we can't give proprietary individual sales tax, but we did look at the businesses that utilize this, and can't remember the duration that we looked back, and there was not a correlation with, granted, we have to look at it on a month basis, but there was not a correlation between the outdoor merchandise placed out there and revenue. So I think it gets to a lot of what you guys have been talking about, and is people come downtown for a variety of reasons. And if there are events and the weather's nice and people are out and the economy's good, they spend money. And, you just couldn't correlate merchandise on the street with those businesses and when they were either making money or not making money. And so you start to look at the weather, you start to look at was the criterion occurring, were we taking out ads, were other businesses taking out ads that drew people down there. And you guys haven't mentioned this, but remember, we're doing other things for the businesses as well. We're doing the street, the signage program that I think will be implemented before too long. Mike?
Correct. The signage wayfinding program, the RFP is ready for bidding out those signs. So it's
for construction and implementation.
Correct. So that should be coming here shortly.
So that'll help those off Main Street. And again, they're paying less rent, but we're trying to tell people who come down, hey, you can go down to X, Y, and Z business, and the sign is here, so they don't do should we walk down there?
And to your point, I agree with you, because I think it's important to stay at the 30,000-foot view in a sense, because if council in my opinion, and I'm the newbie, but in my opinion, if we get
That's
into
the last
saying,
time you get to say that.
but if we say, well, there are 4 people that want this and 6 that don't, I think our job is to be looking at it from a viewpoint of what's going to create better business in the long term for the greater downtown area, what's good for the neighborhood. And that the individual businesses certainly have a piece of that, so you can add it all up, but we need to do what brings the most people into the area.
Bruce?
I think I'm the outlier on this, but I think if our intent is to have nobody do it, we accomplish that by saying 3 days a month. Because 3 days a month doesn't relate to anything in the business world in terms of having a cohesive, organized sales plan of any kind. It's more of a hazard, or rather more of an inconvenience than anything else. So 3 to me means what we really intended to do was say, don't do it, in my opinion. And then we have a permit process that lists what they can actually display out there. So we do get subjective about this in the permit process. And I think that's a little problematic of trying to describe for a business what they're going to display out there with any specificity. It's kind of what Councilmember Hopping mentioned about Colorado Springs. It's one person's opinion whether that fits or not. Items of clothing, could be, fit any kind of description. I think that's problematic for us as a council to authorize that kind of language. If our issue is clutter, there's nothing in here that really addresses clutter. If you don't want items on the sidewalk, it doesn't say we don't put items on the sidewalk that I'm aware of. We should be very specific. We should say tables, racks, if that's our intent. Let's be specific if we're dealing with clutter. And I think, finally, if we're concerned about safety or movement or those kinds of things, or people with dogs, et cetera, then why have we authorized something that's bigger than this table out there? It's going to be 3 feet out from the wall. This isn't even 36 inches here. It's going to be, using the 20-foot square foot, it's going to be about 6.5 feet long. That's longer than these tables. If that's our real issue, let's define a table or a rack size that's going to deal with that specific issue, or let's just say we don't want them to do it. And I understand we can say we don't want them to do it. It's absolutely a reason to. But if we're going to go through the hoopla of setting up a permitting, ask for them to apply, ask for their liability insurance, have an application process, have them subject to enforcement actions, say 3 days a month, I'm just not getting it. So I either say don't do it at all, or if our intent is to allow it, let's allow it reasonably.
Excuse me, but Michael, you asked if I wanted to change the number of days a month, and I didn't have the full ordinance when I got here, and I didn't realize it was 3. So I would agree with Bruce. If you're going to allow it, allow it. And because you don't want to, if a business needs it, you don't want to restrict them to saying they only maximize their business those number of days a month. So I struggle with it because I don't like I don't personally like all the stuff on the sidewalk, but I'm listening to what the people down there have to say about what helps those individual businesses. And I think when we can't control the market, you've got to allow that some of these businesses, and I'd be interested in the controls of your data, that some of them are saying it makes a definite business difference, and to limit them to 3 a month, you might as well keep it consistent.
They're not using any. That's the thing.
Well,
if they're, I'm not buying my business is failing or suffering because I can't put my stuff on the sidewalk. Mm-hmm. I'm not buying it because even when we didn't have an ordinance on it, there were very few that were doing it. We had one that was abusing it, and the other merchants are the ones that got her, that started this about the fact that they didn't like what she was doing and creating the mess downtown. So then we say, okay, well, we'll create something that makes it legal for you guys, because right now you cannot do it. We do, nothing happens. Not a single one comes down and does a permit. And so I don't, if that is the case, that my business is 100% dependent, the success of my business is 100% dependent on me having something outside, and I could never do it because it was illegal, but I still signed up, I still signed my lease, I still started my little business here. Now it's legal, and I'm still not going to go down and get a permit. So I don't buy it.
Well,
That it hasn't been proven. And when we run those numbers, when those numbers were run, and I think, Michael, I feel like it was over a period of a year, or was it even 9 months?
I thought it was multiple years, and we compared like summertime season.
Yeah, it was a year before, and then the few months after the fact, I believe.
Is it racks in, racks out? I mean, because that's the control we're looking for.
Comparing what?
Yes.
No, we weren't. So not to get off topic on the conversation, but it was, and this was an issue for Councilmember Valdez, is we weren't enforcing it, so people had stuff out on a consistent basis.
They have for decades.
Yeah, and that's been, I don't know about decades, but it's, it's ebbs and flows. But when the merchandise was last summer, when it had to be off, some of those folks had their highest years. And again, we had to, for council, we had to.
How do we know they had the highest, did they have their highest years in expenses as well?
I
I mean, they may have more sales, but their expenses surely went up as well.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah, so they say that, oh, their sales are great, well, their expenses,
Well,
they need more sales to make up.
So the question here is the use, and going back to Councilmember Stallman's statement, it's the public's right-of-way, and under what conditions do you want to let the private sector benefit from the use of the public right-of-way? And what we looked at was when we enforced in that summertime, some of those people had the best years, the best revenue years, and certainly their expenditures would have been up, but we were looking at the correlation, and at wintertime, when people typically don't put stuff out, that there was not a correlation with stuff that when people typically put stuff in the right-of-way and those associated revenues. And so what we expect happens is, as I said earlier, it has much more to do with what's happening in the downtown, what's the weather like, what's the economy like, do you have what I'm interested in purchasing? And, you know, is there a day when somebody has stuff out and they have a better day than others? Yes, because we collect sales tax on a monthly basis, not on a daily basis. You know, we have that same challenge when we have the Criterion event and looking at what business did well and what business don't, because we don't collect on that weekend basis. So we have to trust that they're giving us relatively accurate data here. But I think the assumption, again, is under what conditions, and Councilmember Hopping, this might come back to you based on Councilmember Cole's question, if 3 isn't the right number for you, what becomes that number where it's a balance between the public's use and the private's expectation, or your expectation of the use for the private property?
Jerry? Thank you. There's been sidewalk displays literally out there, not 24/7, but for decades. The sidewalks out there have been used. And I think you recently said, what, it's been 12 businesses I guess at most that is using it right now, or thereabouts. And they're not using it day in, day out. I was down there this past weekend, and during the week, there was stuff out there. What I do like about the current ordinance is that it does require certain things, like distances, the 6 feet from the curb or something like that.
It remains 6 feet.
Required to have liability insurance, proof of liability insurance, things like that. What I don't like is the 3-day limit. I think it was last Wednesday or something like that when I was down there. The streets were really, during the middle of the day, were packed. Because
That was women's only sample tour.
they had a women's only sample. The street was packed. And that would be a perfect time for someone who utilizes a sidewalk display. Now, and what I don't like about the current ordinance, and as Councilman Beckman pointed out, I think it's too much. It's way too much. The idea of having something on the sidewalk is just to get hopefully someone to do an impulse buy. Most of the business down there, obviously, they don't need it, but there are some out there that can take advantage of it. I would be okay with increasing the number of days, leaving in the same requirements, and reducing the space that is allowed to use on the public streets.
I have a question on something else. I mean, it's related, but it's not merchandise. So how do we deal with people putting flower pots or an old wheelbarrow or some other antique-y thing just to kind of call attention to their store, something decorative? If that's in the public right-of-way, are we doing something about that?
In some instances, yes. We have a challenge downtown in that there are places within the downtown where there is perceived public space that's technically owned by the building or the business. And so those store owners or merchants can put things out because technically it's on their private property or their leased property, whereas just across the street, someone can't, because then they're placing something in the right-of-way. So in that instance, it would be enforced. So it's a complicated issue when you get to, it's literally business by business and looking at how much, if they have right of way or if they have some space to put it in.
So Councilman Valdez, I guess I'd ask, since the mayor is looking thoughtful at the moment, do you have a suggestion on the
Offensive.
on the number of days? And then I'm not looking for you to arbitrarily pick the size of the square footage of the display. I think we can, if there's council direction and interest to shrink that, we can come up with a realistic number. We don't need you to pick one, but did you have a thought on the number of days?
Yes, it would have to be manageable, and that was, and you mentioned that the last time we talked about that, and that's when it really struck me, is, well, how do we manage a number of days if people aren't really coming in for a permit anyway? What's more important to me, are they exceeding the
I would assume that they have to come in for a permit. Assume that.
Are they exceeding the space to the sidewalks or the walkway? Are they exceeding the merchandise display space?
Yeah. So we're not
That
saying...
would be one I think we could easily manage without a permit.
Well, we still need the permit because of the
But if
proof
we're
of
going to do a
insurance.
permit, so managing days is not an issue for you so much?
Correct.
Then I would just to pick a number, I'm going to say 8.
Okay, I'd like folks to maybe respond to a proposal. So I'm going to try and cover a number of issues, and you can,
Paraphrase.
and you will have a chance to react at each one of them. Okay, one is 8, and 8 is a per month item. Less space. Standardization or not with the display, i.e. a cart a la how Aspen or some others actually use it.
With standardization, would it be more of a thing of
You use the cart or you don't.
a cart? Okay, gotcha.
Okay, you're going to put something out there, you use the cart. Okay? And then my thought, if it's such a benefit to the business, is it's actually a lease arrangement so that the permit and the number of days has some fee attached to it.
I have a question on the standardization. Would there be cost involved with that? And if so, who would absorb those costs? If you have to buy specific cart, like here's a cart you can use, it's X amount, the merchant would need to buy that cart.
Right. And I'll put a hypothetical out there, which is for your, I don't know how much a cart would cost, but for your first 8 days that you use it, your lease is waived because you purchased the cart.
What was that? So the first year?
No, I said the first 8 days.
First 8 days.
I don't know what a cost would cost, but I was putting a hypothetical out there that says if it's of interest to the business and it's a revenue item for them, we actually have a lease arrangement that says if you're going to utilize the public right of way.
They can't use it if they don't have a cart anyway.
Correct.
So the fee structure would be set up.
I don't know what the fee number is. I'm putting it out there as a hypothetical parameter, trying to say, hey, if we allow it, we move to 8 days, we restrict the space, we standardize the display, we address what is important to the city is that we continue to have a flow, or allowance for a flow of people, a safe flow that happens. And it seems that no one has necessarily used the whole 20 feet, and I think that's probably excessive in most instances. And the cart might need to be 2 feet wide rather than 3 feet, so it's going to be less space.
So for clarification, so what would go in the cart?
the merchandise that they choose to display.
So I mean, is somebody going to just, for example, lie a dress in a cart?
If you recall Aspen, I think they had two options. They had a hanging, if you wanted to put clothes out, they had a rack that and I don't recall how they handled the purchase and acquisition of that, but they had a rack for clothes, and they had what are you calling it?
Cart.
A cart for
Merchandise.
And they were standardized. I
Okay,
mean,
but since you only mentioned one item, that's part of what I was trying to
yeah, so
wrap
they,
my brain
because
around.
they
I
addressed.
said a la Aspen, so that was my wiggle room, okay? What I was trying to do is put a thought out there, and you can pick at the details on it, but it's really trying to say, okay, let's deal with that, because we're trying to, in all instances, maintain the character as well as the safe flow. And those are the two items that I think everyone has mentioned. And if we, by a standardization of display, somehow reduce the cluttering aspects, can we get to 8 and have folks react to that?
Down the road, when we look at the streetscapes and we look at where we're going with the strategic plan for downtown, I was picturing benches or trash cans or displays. I mean, we could have a standardization in the future project that all makes it work together. If we were to stay on this track, I like the idea of standardizing a display based on the idea we're going to be standardizing some other things down there.
Standardizing.
And we'll be providing the bench. Or if a business could very well say, I would like to have one of those little benches down by us, and they may want to buy it, for all we know. Whereas we may have had a plan to provide some. So there's some potential for growth with this idea and potential for that look that we're looking for, allowing each business to handle it a little differently. I like that idea.
I was going to say on this standardization, I don't think we should come up with that now. That would be for Michael's staff to come up with something like that, I would think.
I'm not asking council to design it right now.
No.
Whatever else someone may. Benches are a good place. A lot of folks, we do have a lot of seniors, and there's not a whole lot of places to sit down there as you walk around.
You don't want to talk about restrooms either.
About restaurants.
Restrooms.
No.
Public restrooms, not tonight.
Just keep a few bushes around.
Well, the standardization does solve the space problem, and it does solve the kind of that clutter problem and you can, it would, if done correctly, it could add to the aesthetics and charm. So I would favor that, and I would favor that.
Mr. Mayor, also, too, if we were to standardize, you'd have to look at the 6-foot passage area.
That's why I said it may only be 2 feet wide to allow for that wherever it might be used.
And even if that's 2 feet wide, there still may be places in the community that
Well, then you're going to have to tell.
They can't have a bench either, and they can't have a trash can either. Oh, well.
It's their space they rented. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yes. I mean, on one side, and it's come out somewhat in the discussion, and I mentioned it, that the city's ordinances, if a business had outdoor merchandising be an essential element, they skipped a step in their due diligence because the city did not allow for it. And so if we're taking the step of allowing something which wasn't allowed before, and I know some folks will yell and scream about that, but that's where something was missed. And so trying to make some accommodation that says, hey, we want to maintain the character, we want to keep things, but here's the parameters, and if you're so interested, this is the parameters. Any other comments?
So I'll still go back. So if somebody didn't want to display merchandise, but they wanted an incredible plant of some sort, or little tree, portable tree, right? Not one in the ground, but something, or a little piece of sculpture or whatever. Would we maybe be able to accommodate that? Something that's going to support...
Put it on the cart and pay the lease.
Okay, but it's all right. So, but I mean, all I'm saying is, as staff comes up with the containers or holders or whatever, if we envision some way that somebody would have something that distinguishes their business, like the unfortunate store that had its bicycle stolen.
I understand.
But, I mean, those are part of the kind of really neat things that attract people to certain businesses, even though the bicycle wasn't anything to do with the store, I mean, directly.
I understand.
Bill, are you thinking on the standardization with that? What are you thinking in terms of days, limiting days?
Well, I was thinking I was using 8 as being one of the things that was suggested, 8 a month, and say, okay, you've got it, and your lease rate depends on the number of days.
Mm-hmm.
Or your lease level, not rate. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Bruce.
Yeah, like the standardization issues, interesting. I would be enthusiastic about that. I think it defines a space, which I'm fine with. The permit fee issue, we can only do cost recovery anyway, can't we?
Well, we're talking about enforcement as well.
Yeah, and you could do it as, I think, through a permit lease. I mean, we can confirm, but I think you can charge it because you're utilizing, you're
Tell them what they have to use.
Yeah, well, and you're utilizing the public's right-of-way, so I'm leasing that space. So if you turn it more into a lease over a standard permit, you can probably charge a commensurate amount to recover costs.
There are a number of communities that do just exactly that.
There are what?
There are a number of communities that do exactly that. They call it a lease for the public right-of-way.
All right, that might not be a bad idea. The 8, I don't know, it strikes me as a little bit beefy. I might,
I'm looking for consensus.
I'm not sure I
Or a
can.
coalescence, how's that?
I might have to withhold my enthusiasm on that one a bit.
Okay. Bruce, you had something else to say?
Yeah, I was just thinking, and you're going down the path now, we've got to figure out now and then the future plan. So, I mean, I think it's helpful to walk away from tonight with some direction that's helpful for where we are today, but I think we have a better future idea that will take future study. So, and then on the idea of the number of days, I would settle on a consensus basis for some number greater than the 3. So, because I don't think 3 fits. I think there's others that don't fit. But if I can go farther up the chart, I'm with consensus on that. And if 8's the number that we reach on with consensus, I'd rather have it be, 365.
Peggy, do you have any comments?
I agree.
You okay?
Was I gonna... Bruce made me think of something. I was on the standardization. Oh, yeah. I think if we determine that we want the standardization, then that's something we can tell Civitas that this is what we're doing, and then they can build that into the streetscape. So we don't have to wait for them to tell us what we can tell them we want to do that, which may be a good solution on that end too. Well, part of it is, I think, and I don't want to get in the weeds, but we have to be a little bit realistic in that we don't know what these things are going to cost. And so here, you buy it for this period amount of time, and then we might tell you can't use them again. So I think we need to make some sort of a commitment if we're asking them to make that kind of commitment. That's more than we all need to talk about. But I'm with Bruce. I'm not with Bruce Stallman. I'm not real. We just pull 8 out of the air, pulled 3 out of the air. We know what is the right number.
Eight at least came from a conversation. I mean, I don't know if that's where you pulled it from, Jerry, but 8 came from a conversation with an impacted business, a user, not I won't say impacted, a desired user of the public right-of-way, and a previous council member, and they had, good, bad, or indifferent, they had at least come up with 8, which is where that last ordinance came from. So at least it's got a semblance in a conversation with a business owner that alleges that this is a benefit to their business.
Yeah, and I said 8 to come up with more of a compromise. I too would rather have, every day would be fine with me. But to get to a decision on this, I can live with an 8.
The number of days, whatever it is that flexible? I mean, can the merchant decide that day, gee, it's a sunny day, I think this is
Certainly.
my right mix
They
of
just have to get the
business.
permit.
So they can get a permit, so that changes it a little bit. I think,
This is not an administrative issue. This is a policy issue for the council. We will administer what your policy direction is.
And I understand that. Believe me, I don't want to get into administration.
I appreciate the questions, but I think at this point, it's really, again,
Figure it out.
yeah, what do you want for the use of the right?
No, I just wonder, the way this was worded, is that a flexible thing for you
Yes.
to enforce or
Yeah.
not? Because I think the character, like I said before, is paramount, and the business model that these people have is what really determines when they put these out and when they don't. The space issue, so the number of days, I can just be specifically vague and ambiguously direct on it. I don't, it's.
So I'll give you my
wishy-washy.
personal opinion on this one, Bill. If we get pushback on 8, it's less than 8.
Well, that's not a bad approach, so I'll go with that.
I'm with that.
The amount of space, I think that 3 feet from the building to 6 feet from the sidewalk is the key part, and the standardization sounds like a good idea to me. I would think the model of having, a pretty good look by your staff, Michael, to see what kinds, because the bicycle you talked about is a character builder, but somebody that puts a card table out, that's not a character builder. So, I trust that standardization would consider that variety of types of things so that it is consistent with a good character of downtown. And I think there should be a fee because there's a cost to this. And if our job is to manage a budget, if there's a cost to doing it, we have to charge to produce that service. It's got to be a business model. And if the people make that much money or make more money because of it, they should be able to pay the fee that it costs the city to provide the service. And there's no reason that the rest of the taxpayers should pay that fee or pay the expense.
Part of the reason for 8 also is that, that's basically 2 days a week, or 4 days or 4 weeks a month. So it does give some flexibility, whether it's just Friday, Saturday, Sunday, if they're open on Sundays.
Okay, so, council, I am sensing a coalescence. Unless somebody has a tremendously allergic reaction, please let me know. Less space with a standardized display. What is important is the people flow and allowing that to be freely. Standardization takes into consideration some of the character. We're dealing with 8 days a month, and that we would have a lease cost.
You're going to vet this with the merchants. What's our plan on that again?
I'm going to bring an ordinance, and I would, if I may, I'm going to look around the table and see if we bring an ordinance forward that identifies these issues. Do we have a majority of council that will support this?
And this is really still a short-term ordinance because streetscape's going to potentially change some things.
But think what streetscape means is widening the sidewalk.
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day.
Well, we got some trees that may have to go and be replaced with a different tree.
Short-term, I think, means
It could be a number of
2
years.
years plus.
It's a long process.
So it's not a short-term ordinance in the sense that we're going to go out there next year, unless council allocates a fair amount of money, and widen those sidewalks. It means we do the design work, we're going to have to do the engineering, have the funding allocated, et cetera. So I think, what I think of it is the short term is you guys put an ordinance out last year. Nobody utilized it, so you're modifying it based on the conversations and that you had with the businesses and the conversation you had tonight. We're going to put it back out there. The timing's good. Summertime's coming up. Let's see if people utilize it, get some feedback from the users of the downtown as you have friends and family that come and visit, get feedback from the business. I'll keep plowing away then. And, at the end of during the fall, we can debrief and see, did this meet our needs, the community's needs, AK, as well as the business needs. And if we need to tweak it, you guys can tweak it again. So I think it's not in stone. It's your ordinance. You can amend it as you see fit. Implementation of the streetscape plan is most likely years out. I mean, you will see parts and pieces of it, but the substantive change that will modify the conversation you had tonight will be a wider sidewalk.
Just to answer your question, I'm interested in seeing another ordinance. I withhold whether I'd vote for it or not till the night of do we have the ordinance?
Well, I'm just asking because this is going to be a fair amount of staff work, and I'd like to know that there's general support, coalescence around the
I think
mayor's
you got
questions. Okay?
As good as we can expect.
We'll move forward then.
Okay. Council, thank you for this evening. Reminder that Council Member Mayor Pro Tem Beckman and I are going to be doing a council coffee on Thursday morning over at the Safeway. So, not for council to come by for free coffee.
Yeah, where can we get free coffee?
Right.
Just don't talk to each other.